Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey, and welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. He comes to us from the great state of Alabama. His name is Hans G. Schantz, Schantz. He published a book recently in the last couple of years, and the full title of the book is The Whys of Heart, a modern day reimagining of the Scopes monkey trial. And it's very well illustrated, and I think it's timely too, with all so many things. If you've listened to my show over the years, I've covered a lot of transgender stuff with Roberta Glass, the True Crime Report, and some of these other things. So it keeps recurring in the news. I covered a transgender bad guy in Oxford, UK. His name was Scarlett Blake, and in the court, it kind of overlaps with this, believe it or not, because in the court they wouldn't tell his actual birth name. They said his transitioned male to female name, so the female name. And it's unbelievable that they, even in this august body in the UK, they couldn't just objectively say this guy was once a man and this was his birth name. And I honestly, I couldn't find it out even in the newspapers. So it's like people are afraid, or they're conditioned or whatever, to really walk tenderly around this. I got in trouble for using the word TRANNY last week, and not of casual, in a casual thing online, like it's in reference to somebody really got upset. So it's a sensitive subject. People watch my show. I did a show on the Zizians, and just a lot of different things going on. But I'm glad he wrote this book. It's not his first book. He writes on a wide variety of different subjects. Some of his other books are science fiction. He's done academic work. One is The Art and Science of Ultra Wideband Antennas, also a biography of John C. Fremont. That should be interesting if you know Fremont. And then three books of science fiction techno thriller: The Hidden Truth, The Rambling Wreck, and The Brave and the Bold. But again, we're going to talk about this book, The Whys of Heart, a modern day reimagining of the Scopes monkey trial. And again, the author is Hans G. Schantz. So Hans, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's been a long and interesting adventure in writing and marketing the book. It was a few years ago, I was watching the movie Inherit the Wind. That's the classic dramatization of the Scopes monkey trial. And I was struck by an epiphany that back in the 20s, the progressive narrative was that they were the enlightened champions of science who were triumphing over the backwards, superstitious, religious hill people of Appalachia in the story. And it occurred to me the shoe is really on the other foot today, where it's not the progressives who are the champions of science, but who are literally defying biological science and the truths of biological science in their pursuit of the transgender agenda. So, as a scientist myself, I'm a physicist instead of a biologist, but more importantly, as a father who's deeply disturbed at the notion of children being coerced or encouraged to undergo genital mutilations and other type irreversible medical procedures on behalf of this ideology, I was inspired to write the book. It was really remarkably easy to write compared to the other more free-form science fiction novels that I've done before, because I very closely followed the actual events of the Scopes trial. So a good part of the courtroom drama and the language and the lawyers wrangling back and forth that you'll find in The Whys of Heart comes more or less straight from the transcript of the Scopes trial, just updated and adapted for the transgender issues. One thing I found particularly challenging in writing it is my science fiction novels also tend to satirize or spoof social justice ideologies. And it's normally very easy to do that because so much of the social justice ideology is almost indistinguishable from satire itself. If you just do a little bit of research and some editing, you can write a really good satire of it. And I had a lot of difficulty doing that on the subject of transgenderism, because what I discovered is there really is not much of a specific justification that makes a lot of sense for transgenderism. And you can see that, for instance, if you're familiar with Matt Walsh's excellent documentary, What is a Woman? And how he had supposed experts in the field just completely stumped and unable to answer even the most simple question like that. So in my efforts to steelman the subject, I concocted and laid out what I think is probably the most rigorous defense and explanation of transgenderism that you'll find just about anywhere. So, it's a very informative exposition of the story, because I think the facts really speak for themselves on the transgenderism. The history of it is just rife with scientific fraud, with people pursuing their ideology at the expense of the actual data and results, with really tragic consequences in any number of instances. So I was very glad to get the book written and out there. And once I'd written the book, the real adventure began, because I was working with an illustrator, crowdfunding the illustrations and the art for the line drawings that are inside the book. I had it on Kickstarter and everything was going well. They approved it. I was getting near the end of my fundraising period. I had raised all of the money I needed to cover the art, and I was aiming for a stretch goal of being able to fund an audiobook production as well. And just days before my crowdfund campaign closed, Kickstarter canceled the project. So fortunately, I had a lot of friends who were very helpful and knowledgeable, helped me get set up on an alternate site, fundmycomic.com. I can't say enough good things about them and their willingness to fund controversial, potentially politically incorrect projects like mine. I finished my fundraising there, and in fact, more than doubled the amount of funds that I had when Kickstarter canceled my project. So it actually ended up being a very good thing for the book, particularly with all the publicity that I got. It was picked up by Fox News, The Blaze, popular culture sites like Bounding Into Comics, and Upstream Reviews. So it, a good example of the Streisand effect. It was a really good publicity boost for the book. So,
but it just shows what a sensitive topic it is, right? The ability for them to want to censor it, and our ideas. You can't make these questions or actually contradict what we're saying. Like, this is really totalism in a way. It's like, wow, I can you're not allowed to have another opinion. It's really something else. Right. And they'll go after you financially too. That's another kind of element of this the application of the transgender ideology. For people who don't maybe not know how important the Scopes trial was, maybe can you do a brief overview of I think it was William Jennings Bryant, and then the other guy, a really famous lawyer whose name escapes me right now. But it was just so important at that time. It really captured the public imagination, right?
It really was a pivotal moment. And the 1920s are a fascinating period, because that was really where the major effort came in to replace the traditional religious worldview with an alternate worldview of scientism, replacing science as science becoming the state religion as opposed to the previous Christian ideology. So you had Darwin replacing Genesis and creation. You had Freud coming into popularity, telling everyone that we're wretched, depraved creatures who merely want to have sexual relations with our mothers and kill our fathers. And of course, Marx coming into vogue with his class struggle theory of history and of politics. So in the 1920s, there's an interesting connection to the other side project I have, where I'm working on understanding where science went wrong. And you can see a lot of that in the 1920s as Einstein in particular was being popularized for his theory of relativity, which was thought to prove scientifically that there are no absolute truths. And the Scopes monkey trial was right in the middle of that period in 1925. What happened is the state of Tennessee passed what's called the Butler Act that forbade the teaching of evolution in public schools or schools funded by the state. And a number of people were interested in challenging that law in court. The ACLU volunteered to back the defense of anyone who wanted to challenge it. And some business people in Dayton, Tennessee, a little town that is between Chattanooga and Knoxville in eastern Tennessee, they decided that they would take up the challenge. So they recruited their local high school teacher, John T. Scopes, and got him to volunteer to teach evolution and then be arrested. And that attracted a lot of national attention on the side of the prosecution. We got William Jennings Bryan, who was very famous as a populist and presidential, multiple-time presidential candidate. He was Secretary of State under Woodrow Wilson until he resigned in 1915 in protest of Wilson's efforts to push the U.S. into war with Germany. So really, one of the leading statesmen of the day. And on the other side was Clarence Darrow, a very prominent, very famous attorney. He was fresh from getting, I think it was Leopold and Lowe off of a murder conviction. They had been reading Nietzsche and decided they were the Ubermen, and to demonstrate that they would commit the perfect crime and kill someone. Of course, they got caught. And yet Darrow was able to get them off from their murder conviction, for which he was not appreciated throughout much of the country. So that was the starting point of the trial. It ran for about a week in the middle of a very hot summer time in Tennessee. The crowds were so big that they had to move the trial outside because they were afraid the courtroom floor wouldn't be able to support the weight of the spectators. Plus, the heat inside was just completely stifling. The trial ended up with with Scopes being found guilty and paying a nominal fine. But what was particularly memorable about it was the final cross-examination where Clarence Darrow put William Jennings Bryan on the stand to question him about his fundamentalist perspective on the Bible. In Inherit the Wind, it's portrayed as William Jennings Bryan, or the Bryan stand-in character, dying in the courtroom immediately after that. In real life, Bryan succumbed to some kind of illness and died suddenly about a week after the trial. So, very momentous, very important episode in U.S. history.
Right, really something else. In the movie, like you said, Inherit the Wind comes out of that, and really changed kind of school teaching. It goes back to then, where this kind of scientific. There's so much Hitler was influenced by a lot of American things that happened to America. Rise of Darwin was during that time.
Right.
I've done a number of shows on that. So then it brings you up into the present day, and maybe this whole transgender ideology is kind of like, what's that? I see these flags all over the place. There's flags. There's actually I saw one today. There's Andy No, who's a known kind of reporter, had this transgender ideology flag with a Kalashnikov inside. Apparently, it's a very warlike symbol. It's not just a flag, but with the gun, it means, we got to fight back against this perceived persecution. Some people literally think there's a transgender Holocaust. Can you kind of talk how you set up in the book this kind of background into this modern reimagining of the Scopes monkey trial?
Sure. The book starts off, unlike Inherit the Wind, which frames it as the innocent teacher minding his own business when all of a sudden, out of the blue, the police arrest him for teaching evolution. My story explicitly covers the aspect of how the townspeople are colluding with my teacher protagonist to set this up. So the novel opens in a little diner where the school superintendent is trying to pitch the notion of having a test case on the state's new law forbidding the teaching of biological sex and requiring gender affirmation. And he has the local university president, who was a prime mover in getting the state to pass the law, having her try to find someone willing to prosecute it, and the teacher signing on, the mayor of the town agreeing, but leaving it in the hands of the superintendent. What I have then is the arrest, where the teacher, Mike Andrews, is arrested for teaching evolution. It turns out that his girlfriend, who is also the daughter of the university president, her name is AC, is involved in this, and that sets up a conflict between them that runs the whole novel. AC is kind of an everyman character who is just wondering why we can't just apologize and move on, and why does there have to be so much of a fuss about this, and ultimately ends up being one of the more interesting characters because he has to choose between her boyfriend, the teacher who has been arrested and is on trial, and her mother, the university president, who's really determined to destroy him to make her political points. So both sides end up recruiting a nationally known politician, completely fictional, but you'll see the imprints of a number of contemporary figures in the characterization that I do. One fun feature is at the beginning of each chapter, I have a kind of Greek chorus of reporters and podcasters and influencers, each spinning the events of the previous chapter, trying to persuade the reader that their perspective on what really happened is what they should believe. So it makes for a very fast-paced story. It really just takes place over the course of a week as the trial then comes to a conclusion.
And it's in the context, you have this Gaia Act, right? This Gender Awareness in Academia Act. So it's kind of like these laws are being passed. Like they're trying to pass. Like, I think that was one of the things about Jordan Peterson is like he rose to fame over whether these pronouns, these kind of gender, may not be trans. Maybe it's under the umbrella of transgenderism, but I think that's really it. These pronouns are part of it, aren't they? And so, but the state mandated aspect of it is really what they wanted, right? The transgender activists.
I'm not aware of any law that has been passed analogous to the law I describe in The Wise of Heart that specifically forbids the teaching of biological sex in favor of gender affirmation instead. But there've certainly been some teachers who have run afoul of the transgender mafia. There's Enoch Burke in Ireland who got fired and gotten a lot of legal trouble for his determination to defend biological science. There was a university adjunct instructor in San Antonio who also got fired for his advocacy of biological sex and saying sex is determined by your chromosomes. So there are some examples of this happening today.
I think that's what they were trying to push for that in Canada. I don't think they got it, but I remember debates 4 or 5 years ago with these guys, and it's like they wanted criminal penalties for not having proper pronouns, which is incredible. I mean, it really is when you think about it. So and you see that this ideology's crept all the way through in these flags and all the things, all through public education, even private education mandated and all that stuff. But I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say the scientific justification for it. Of course, gender is a term from language, and like the Romance languages in particular will have different nouns having different genders. You have masculine and feminine nouns, and you have to use the right pronouns in front of them for the gender. That concept of gender got appropriated and moved from language into a kind of sexual identity. And that was big in the 1950s and 60s. There was a researcher named John Money, and he's most famous for a very sad story where there were two twins in Canada, one of whom suffered basically an
injury. Yeah, an injury to his genitals.
Yes, while he was undergoing circumcision, and his parents consulted with Dr. Money, and Money told them, "Well, we'll just lop the rest of it off and fashion a vagina, and you'll treat him like a girl, and since sex is completely socially determined, everything will turn out well." And of course, it didn't. He had very serious problems, particularly when he finally realized that he was born a boy and his parents had been trying to pretend he was a girl all through his life. Money reported the case anonymously in the literature as an example of his his theory that sex is socially determined instead of biologically determined, and reported in glowing terms that how successful his study was. Well, it was a complete disaster, and in fact, David Romer, who was the twin in question, ended up committing suicide. So the science underlying the whole transgender ideology is just full of horrible incidents like that.
I think both of the kids committed suicide. I think both of the twins committed suicide, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but I remember that case. Money was an interesting character. He had a different agenda. I think he was an occultist. Like, he was kind of I'd say he was a royal creep, in my opinion, almost on the level of Kinsey. Like, I know Kinsey really well. He was another piece of work who kind of is part of this broader move of kind of moving away from traditional kind of things, for sure. But I think that the whole transgender ideology, it takes place within a larger mental or intellectual framework of just so many different changes, gender studies and, oppression and all these other things that are these other kind of views of the left. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Well, there was a big push in psychology that really gained momentum in the 1960s toward behaviorism, toward the notion that environment was responsible, and that was the scientific justification behind welfare. If only we leveled the playing field and made sure everyone had equal access to food and shelter and a good education, everyone would be equal. One of the studies, there was another notorious psychological study that was done at the time with twins and triplets who were put up for adoption. And the adoption agency coordinated with a Yale psychologist whose name I'm forgetting right now. But basically what they did was they deliberately took identical biological twins and split them up, putting one twin in an upper class wealthy family and placing the other with a lower working class poorer family, in order to prove conclusively that it was the environment, not biology, that was responsible for life outcomes. And it turned out that even though these twins were raised in separate environments, they ended up having remarkable similarities, sometimes even down to their favorite hobbies and tastes and
Wow.
very subtle characteristics. It showed how much biology is at play in determining who we are. And in fact, the study was so controversial that the researcher abandoned it and locked up all the data, and now no one is going to be able to see it until, I think, sometime in the 2060s. Until everyone is long dead and in the grave, because it was unethical in the first place to do that, and in the second place it basically refuted the proposition that they had set out to demonstrate.
Right, the behavioralism, or just all nurture, not nature. Why is it so scandalous to insist that biology dictates us as men and women. Like, why is that? And why is it phobic to question that? Like, why does they have to go to that? It's a phobia to actually have genuine concerns. Like, I'm concerned for trans people. Like, is really this the best choice? Like, some of these changes, like especially the operations, they're irreversible. I mean,
Right.
these making really incredible changes. Why isn't it just concerned? Like, I'm not phobic. I'm really worried about your life. I want you to have a good outcome with your life. Like, but it's
Well, and
always
that's
like, sorry.
no, I was just going to say that's one of the great tragedies of it, because too often young people who are in the middle of very serious emotional and psychological difficulties, all of the other issues they might have been going on are swept under the carpet in the haste to help them transition. One of the things I was really kind of shocked to discover as I did the research for my book is they talk about putting puberty on pause with these medications and treatments that will basically pause puberty until someone can figure out or have a better idea if they want to go through and continue to become their biological sex. And the drugs they use are the exact same ones that are used in chemical castration and have some very serious side effects. Even before you start talking about surgical interventions, even the hormone treatments have very serious long-term side effects.
Right. No, it's incredible. There's also been other stories that the dysphoria subsides. Like, people, like, there's something like 85% give them a couple years and they're like through it. I don't think anybody's ever gone through pre-puberty like it's like a walk in the park or whatever. I don't know. So it's really suspect about this dynamic of these adults insisting on vulnerable people to do these changes. And it's incredible. I don't know if have you ever seen the Empath documents by Schellenberg?
No, I haven't.
They're incredible. Yeah. Because like he just shows these doctors are literally, manipulating their patients and not telling them about negative outcomes and really almost doing a sales job. So there's a financial element too, to at least the surgeries, which, is really disturbing. Like, these are not, and I think they shut it down. Like, they had the Tavistock clinic in the UK shut down their whole transgender clinic. And Mark Carney in Canada, his, I think, formerly son, who's now a woman, went through that. It's unbelievable. So it's like these are real, like, happening in real time to real people. It's really something else. But
well, that was one of the big challenges in writing The Whys Apart, because it does touch on some very dark material, but at the same time, I wanted it to have and end on an upbeat and positive note. So you're working through the different conflicts between the attorneys and between Mike and his girlfriend over the course of the story, so that it would end up with a positive and encouraging spin on the events. It was a challenge, but I think I pulled it off.
It's okay to be a boy and a girl. I mean, that's almost like there's like almost a Gnostic kind of, I'm going to change you to something beyond what nature or the God of nature has made you. And it gets to be, it's something's weird about it. Like, would you agree with that? Like, something strange.
Oh, there's a big strand in transhumanist thought about androgyny and about the merging of opposites, and having trying to blend male and female together. That's a big part of the whole Gnostic mystical worldview, and I think we're seeing that play out in a lot of the advocacy of transgenderism.
Interesting. And I mean, you use this kind of court situation, this fictional court situation, to address, it allows you to address real world disputes or conflicts between the opposing parties of pro and anti-trans ideology, I guess, or science.
Right.
What else have I missed? Like, what else do you go into that maybe we haven't talked about yet? I mean, you clearly have a media aspect to this, like this, that shows that these disputes are not taking place in a kind of sterile environment. They're being
Right.
manipulated by media figures, whether it's social media, TV. Everybody has their own spin. Would you agree with that?
Well, absolutely. And that was one of the things that was so interesting, stepping back a moment to the Scopes trial and understanding the extent to which public relations has played a role in trying to influence and brainwash people. I looked into an interesting connection that I don't think people have uncovered before between Edward Bernays, the father of modern public relations, and the popularity of Albert Einstein in America. There's a fascinating story about how when Einstein showed up in America on a tour in 1921, he was there as a member of a Zionist delegation that was trying to raise funds for the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And when the crowds came to the dock to see the Einstein ship arrive, the crowds were Jews who were there specifically because they'd heard Chaim Weizmann and the Zionist delegation were arriving. They were there to see Chaim Weizmann. But the non-Jewish reporters had never really heard of Weizmann, but they had heard of Einstein because he'd been in the news, and interpreted the crowds as all being there to see the scientist, not for the political mission. And what I discovered when I dug into it is that Bernays and Weizmann were very good friends, and that they acknowledged that Bernays had worked for and consulted with Weizmann in the 1920s. I haven't found any direct evidence linking Bernays to the Einstein reception, but it fits Bernays's MO of, he was well known for publicizing things by coming up with, instead of handing a reporter a press release or going to an editor and saying, please cover my client, he would create events and circumstances that demanded news coverage. And that was how he would get publicity. For instance, when he got married, he wanted to publicize the fact of his marriage. He didn't just submit an item to the wedding column of the New York Times. He got his wife to sign up for their honeymoon suite and reserve it in her maiden name at the Waldorf Astoria. And that created a huge burst of publicity. It was covered by 200 papers talking about, how can it be that the woman is registering for the honeymoon suite with her maiden name, and the august institution of the Waldorf Hotel or Waldorf Astoria Hotel allowed her to do this. And it was really a triple play for Bernays, because I think the Waldorf Astoria Hotel was one of his clients. He got his wedding publicized, and a lot of his public relations efforts all tended to have that kind of a political twist to it, advancing his political ideas about feminism and equality and so forth. So when I see the whole media circus around the Scopes trial was really part of that same kind of, if not, I don't know that there was a connection between Bernays and the Scopes trial in particular, but that was the kind of publicity and the kind of event that got staged in order to provide the coverage that was needed to draw attention to an idea. So the people who staged the Scopes trial ended up getting increased awareness of evolution, and making it a lot harder for other states to pass laws like that, and so accomplished their purpose through the medium of having that raucous public event requiring news coverage.
Right. So it's almost like they maximized the impact of whatever ideology they had through whatever the most important media story was. So you have to see that in the context of everything, not just transgender. But it is,
I was going to comment that one of the interesting things about Bernays is he started off as a theatrical promoter and impresario. One of his first big triumphs was promoting a play called Damaged Goods. that was about a man who had, I think, syphilis, some sexually transmitted disease, and passed it on to his son. And the playwright wanted to produce this play. And of course, no one would touch the play because it was kind of beyond the pale for the period before World War I. And Bernays launched a publicity campaign pushing how educational this was. And he got support from Rockefellers and Vanderbilts. Even a young Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a contributor to back this. So the by all accounts, dull and hard to endure play got produced after all. And an editorial of the period commented that it made it sex o'clock in America. That was one of his first publicity triumphs. And it also showed how he was using publicity as a tool to advance a political ideology.
I think he was Freud's nephew too, right? Isn't that right?
Yes, and he was after his career as a propagandist for the U.S. government during World War I, he went and he was one of the people largely responsible for promoting Freud in the 1920s and getting him popular and people aware of him. Another of the things he did was a famous author of the period, Theodore Dreiser or Dreisler, I think it's Dreiser, who he was very fond of this obscure gentleman named Charles Fort, who had collected in what he called the Book of the Damned, all of these damned facts that science refused to look at because they didn't fit conventional wisdom. And Dreiser persuaded his publisher to publish Fort's book. And it was heavily promoted by Bernays, who was the PR agent for the publisher. Bernays concocted the slogan, 4 out of 5 people who read this book will go insane. But which I don't quite know how that was so effective, but however he did it, it became very popular. Fort wrote a lot of other books. There was a whole society of his fans and admirers who started what was called the Fortian Society to advance Fort's efforts to collect these obscure facts that don't fit, frogs falling from the sky and other inexplicable observations, with no particular theory around them, just pointing out these don't fit the conventional wisdom. And Bernays commented that he appreciated supporting and backing and promoting Fort because it was an attack on the fetish of the logic of science. So there was a lot of that going on in the 1920s.
Yeah, it's an interesting age. Scopes trial is definitely part of it. We are at the 38-minute mark. Is there anything else you'd like to add or anything I missed?
No, I think we've done a good job covering the story and some of the circumstances around it.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in here. I mean, it's going through like a, exposition of evidence through the trial so people can see this kind of the disputes that are taking place in the public forum today or the public square in this book. So people can check that out. And where's the best place for people to get Wise of Heart?
Just go to Amazon and you can buy it from Amazon there. It's a self-published book. And you also
wrote science fiction. Can you talk a little bit about those, your science fiction books?
Sure. My science fiction is the Hidden Truth, The Rambling Wreck, and The Brave and the Bold. The premise behind that is it's an alternate history conspiracy techno thriller that features a high school student who discovers that the books in his forgotten Appalachian library don't match up with the official online scans that you can find of those same books. And that clue leads him down the road to track down the hidden truth of who is changing the past to control the present and rule the future. I set it in an alternate history timeline because when I wrote that book in 2016, I was a little concerned that readers' suspension of disbelief might have trouble wrapping itself around the notion of government agents acting in illegal fashions in the furtherance of a vast global conspiracy to try to take over the world by a group of connected elite insiders. But I think over the past 2 years, it's become a lot more believable a premise.
Yeah, that's no question. It's interesting you chose to write a book about John C. Fremont. As a Californian, his name is all over the state.
Fremont is such an interesting character. He had just one of the most remarkably incredible, in terms of hard to believe, careers as an Army topographer and explorer. He was effectively a secret agent who was assigned by President Polk to help conquer California in the Mexican War. But of course, communications being what they were, he was given just general orders to hang around there and do what you think is best. So when he heard that the war had broken out, he moved to conquer Northern California, ended up in conflict with the Army general who was sent to conquer Southern California. And his reward for his hard work was to be arrested, court-martialed, taken back to Washington in chains. But he had a remarkable, just a remarkable career of riches and being one of the top generals in the Union Army in the Civil War, and end up his life in poverty. So just all kinds of incredible ups and downs.
Just like a real adventure. It's hard to believe that back before 1850, California was a frontier. Like it was a Spanish or Mexican territory. Spanish.
Some of the events of his life are so improbable that if you wrote them in a novel, people would say, "Oh, that's ridiculous." Like he entrusted his life savings with the American Council in Monterey to buy a ranch in what's now San Jose. The American Council bought that ranch for himself and spent Fremont's life savings buying a vast tract of worthless Sierra Nevada property up in the mountains. Wow. And then by the time Fremont got back to California, it turned out the gold rush was on, and the land that Fremont had purchased, that the agent had erroneously purchased on Fremont's behalf, was now worth upwards of $10 million. And that was in 1850s money.
Right. Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. Great story. This is an important book, guys. Go get The Whys of Heart. Check it out. There's great drawings in here. And I think find a really great exposition of kind of the present state we're in, that we're having these arguments about biological sex and behaviorism and these changes that can happen. But again, the author is Hans G. Schantz, Schantz. And where's the best place to reach out to you, or if anybody has any follow-up questions?
Sure. I'm on Twitter as Etherzar, AETHERCZAR. I have a presence on Telegram as well, where I run the Ether stream. My current project is Fields and Energy: How Electromagnetism and Quantum Mechanics Work and Where Physics Went Wrong. That's on Substack at etherzar.substack.com. And I also help indie authors market books through the Based Book Sale at basedbooksale.substack.com.
Nice. Based Book Sale. So I'll put those 4 links. It'll be Telegram, 2 Substacks, and a Twitter X links. And then I'll put a link to the book as well, so people can check that out.
Sure.
Again, the author is Hans G. Schantz, and the full title of the book is The Whys of Heart, a modern-day reimagining of the Scopes monkey trial. Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
All right, stay there. I have to go to